You're listening to TG1F, an F1 podcast with Kate and Nicole.
We're your hosts. I'm Kate.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is our show where, you know what? Let's do something a little different.
Welcome to TG1F's Read an F1 Romance Novel Month.
F1 romance, author interviews, book recommendations, oh my.
Join us for a month-long celebration of F1 romance authors and the stories that get our hearts racing.
Because while F1 drivers are filling their shelves with trophies, we're filling yours with F1 romance novels.
Who are we talking to today, Kate?
Turn the page and find out. Welcome to the show, Esha Patel. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
We're so excited to talk today. So to kick things off, why don't you give us a little bit synopsis about Offtrack? What can people expect? What are some of the tropes? What's a little bit about the plot? Any spice level, some themes, so that people can know what they're getting into when they buy your book?
So Offtrack is kind of the traditionally published version of the indie novel that I published now a year ago. And it's kind of a story of these two Formula One drivers, one who's gotten like a couple years in the sport, one who's a rookie. And it's the first like female driver in a really long time who's entering the sport. And so she's entering the sport and is kind of like initially like rivals with Miguel. So it's Miguel and Diana. Diana is our female main character, Miguel's our male main character. And they're like also like childhood, like vaguely remember each other from their childhood. So it's kind of like this entire like simmering tension throughout, like starting out as rivals and then slowly becoming friends, and then just like that little slow burn situation. So it's very much like you get your slow burn romance. It's not super spicy. I would say like literally like a 1 to 2 out of 5. But you also get a lot of like racing action drama in there. Like I've had some readers compare it to Drive to Survive. So you kind of go through the entire season.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of everything. My personal favorite part is like the racing scenes. So I would say, you know, you get a little bit of like the slow burn romance, and then you also like build up to this championship. So fun little bundle of things.
I love that.
That sounds amazing. And I love when we've had some people come on and their spice levels are like 10 to 15. But I appreciate when we have people on that the spice levels low, because I'm like, there is such thing as like emotional spice.
Right.
And I think that that's very important too. And something that I sometimes am just really in the mood for. Like, I'm like, I just want to read a romance novel that's just about the romance. Like, I just want to be.
I want vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yes.
I want psychological safety.
Yes.
That's what turns me on. Exactly.
Yes. So your work focuses a lot on diverse romances and very much like healthy love. And so why is that so important to you and so relevant to, you know, especially today?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I kind of mentioned, like I have like a lower spice level on the books. Like it's a little bit more accessible to people of like younger age who might be picking up this book. And it's like really important to me, especially as somebody who grew up watching like Bollywood movies, like heavily inspires my writing. That's kind of just my background. That's my first like notion of romance basically. And so I put that little sprinkle of like the Bollywood romance into my books, but I also like to emphasize that, and like a lot of the love that we see in those movies is not healthy. So I think it's really important, especially for young people reading the books, to know the difference between what is unhealthy and what is healthy. And there are also, you know, some books that don't have the healthiest like romance love situation going on. So I figure it's always important to throw in like, you know, your boundaries, appreciation, like mutual respect, those basic like foundations of what makes healthy love, especially, you know, like I said, because younger people are reading this and basing their expectations for real life on these books and these movies. So kind of just like building forward from what I consumed as a kid and what I gained from those experiences, and just making sure that other young people have something positive to look towards rather than some of the, you know, more toxic, harmful tropes that might be floating around out there.
100%. I mean, it makes sense since you told me you're going to school for psychology.
Yeah.
So, you know, it only makes sense that you are writing from a perspective that, you know, is providing that psychological safety, and you're promoting romances that, you know, we should all have in our lives, right? So that is so special. I think that's something not a lot of people talk about. And I think it's, you know, there is a whole genre and there's a time and a place for a toxic relationship. I think sometimes we want that mess. I'm watching Love Island. I get it. But it is important to be reminded what the healthy love looks like. And so I love that that's the case in Off Track.
Thank you.
So Off Track features a female driver and a female engineer. Tell us about writing through the lens of inclusion of women in sport and STEM fields.
Yeah, so as somebody who's also like, taken some STEM classes and has seen, yeah, because sometimes that can be positive and not so positive. Up front, it really depends on the environment in your classes. Just having seen that, I figured it was like super important to not only include a female driver, but also a female engineer. Because a lot of the things that we see happening in Formula One, happening behind the scenes, are driven by like really, really intelligent and hardworking women like Hannah from Red Bull, my absolute favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Like all
Mhm.
those like killer strategies, like she's behind the scenes negotiating that. So definitely writing from that point of view was really, really fun. And also, I just hope like empowering in general. I would say some of the challenges were definitely with like the jargon and like the technical stuff because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes men are really quick to shoot us down when we don't know exactly what we're talking about. So yeah, I kind of like,
100%.
yeah, in the back of my head, I'm like, if I do something wrong, like, is someone gonna notice? So I'm like being really hard on myself as I'm writing this. But I kind of, as I went, fell more into the mindset of like, just make it authentic. It's more about the emotions than it is about like the facts. Because obviously, when
Mhm.
you're a woman on the grid and the 19 other drivers are men, like, there's a lot of just like self doubt and emotion there. So exploring that
Mm-hmm.
was probably one of my favorite parts about writing, like these driven female characters because like we feel at the end of the day. So it was really important to me that I wove that in there.
Yeah, that's so special.
Thank you.
I love that. And how long have you been a fan of Formula One? Like, what was your introduction to this sport? Is it something you've watched for your whole life? Is it more recent? What was your fan experience in the sport?
Yeah. So thinking back to, I believe this was like the spring of the year I graduated high school. So that's 2022. I got into Formula One like that March. So my dad watched like Drive to Survive. I was like, what is this? I kind of got curious. I was like, let me look into this. And I know a lot of people
Yeah.
diss on Drive to Survive like immediately, but that's kind of how I got into like the entire sport. Um,
Whatever. I would say that's how everyone gets more involved in Drive to
right.
Survive, I think,
Yeah.
personally. Even if you've watched forever, you watch Drive to Survive and you are that much more involved. So it just makes sense that it brought people in.
Yes. They
Yeah.
get so deep into the drama and like into the nitty gritty in some places. I mean, like it's obviously blown up in others, like those rivalries. Not all of them are real. But
Yeah.
definitely got in through that. And then I actually did start listening to podcasts. So I was listening to you guys, and then I think fan behavior. Yes, like I was working as a nursing assistant like last summer, and I had like a 30-minute like commute to work, and I would listen to this podcast. So that's like kind of how I
Oh my
like, yeah,
gosh.
that's like how I
Full
got into
circle.
things.
Full
And yeah,
circle.
I was like, this is such a full circle moment. Because I was like, I love the sport, but I also like the like gossip. I like the little like the whole
Exactly.
paddock situation, like what's going on behind the scenes. So definitely like just a series of things. And now this is, I think, going to be my third season. I think I can't count, but really excited to be getting
I mean,
more and more into this.
you've seen some real ups and downs at this point. So you're in it
Yeah.
to win it.
Yes.
So you've written some other books that are not about Formula
Hmm.
1. What was kind of the journey to writing a Formula 1 book? What inspired you the most to write this book specifically about this sport?
Yeah. So I remember getting into the sport and just thinking to myself, like, there are very few sports like in the world where it's just 20 people at the very top of their game. And like amongst those 20, like only one person eventually comes out as like the champion. So
Mhm.
I was like, there's so much tension there. Like there's so much opportunity to have drama. And then, you watch like DTS and whatnot, and there's like all this like tension. I put it in air quotes because not all of it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
actually happening.
Yeah.
But I like
Yeah.
how they like have these little rivalries going on, and there's just such an opportunity for just like the drama, like the glitz, the glamour, the money, like even the not so fun stuff happening behind the scenes. Like a little bit of everything. So it makes for a really like well-rounded story. From where I was standing when I started thinking about writing Off Track. And obviously I also wanted to start exploring sports and like women in sports more so, especially after like transitioning to college. And where I go, Iowa, we had like Caitlin Clark, like the absolute like most
Mhm.
wonderful thing to have seen in
Yep.
person. Like I'm blessed to have seen her in person.
Yeah.
But going into, like seeing women's sports, I was like, this is something that I really want to explore more in an area where, women haven't been either given credit or just appeared as prominently as we would like them to. So that's kind of how
Yeah.
the whole Formula One romance thought process happened. And initially, Off Track wasn't so much a romance as it was just like going through the season and like all the drama that happens with the cars and the racing. So the romance part, I would say, kind of came after, but definitely it was an
Okay.
interesting writing process for that one.
That is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And were there, so as you were writing this book, especially originally, if it was just going to go through the seasons, was there any, obviously you took inspiration from Formula One as a sport, but was there any inspiration behind any people or any characters that show up in your book that may have been a little bit inspired by people that are actually in the sport right now?
Yeah. So as far as the sport at the moment, this isn't necessarily like in Formula One, but F1 Academy, you have like the Alcabaisi sisters, Hamda and Amna, and
Mhm.
they're like some of my absolute favorite people. Absolutely love watching them. Like since they were, I think Amna was in either F3 or F4, but it was like absolutely phenomenal. And I like watched some of her interviews and read a couple of like articles where she talked about just how like difficult it was to break into the sport,
Yeah.
specifically as a woman of color. And there's like a lot of discrimination that came with that. And, like being able to relate to that in a way, I was like, this story is one that I think I would really be interested in kind of like exploring more through a fictional character. So I would say definitely inspiration for Diana came from the Alcabaisi sisters, especially like those articles and interviews. The stuff that happens off the track was very interesting to me.
Mhm.
And as far as Miguel's character, like he's your Lance Stroll, Carlos Sainz nepo baby, like but with a twist.
Yeah.
He's given that
Love.
kind of vibe. He's kind of a fun character because he has like that flamboyance and like he's like cutthroat when he races, but also in his head he like overthinks, which I think might have come from
Yep.
me. Um, but he overthinks like he's constantly like, am I doing the right thing? Like, am I making the right decisions even on track? So a little bit of that is just kind of like a mishmash of drivers and then just like personality traits where I was like, this is interesting to explore. So that's kind of where I drew my inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to draw inspiration from Carlos. He's everything
He is. He
to me
is.
personally.
Eighth wonder of the world.
Exactly. So, kind of switching gears a little bit, what is, you've written, like I said, like we've talked about, you've written a couple books at this
Mhm.
point. What is your favorite trope to write? And alternatively, is there a trope that you haven't written yet that you're like super eager to get your hands on?
Oh my gosh, this is a fun one. Grumpy Sunshine is my favorite. I like to read that one too. Like it's so cute when one of the characters comes in just like, oh, I hate my life, I hate you, I hate everything, and then by the end they're like transformed, but like or like grumpy in a different font. Like that's my favorite thing ever.
Yes.
I love when one of them like strings the other one along and is like, it's okay to be happy. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's my favorite one to write and one that I would love to explore more because I just read The Wall of Winnipeg, if you guys are familiar with that one. The fake dating trope.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's like full on like fake marriage, but I would love to explore fake dating. So I'm like, that would be an
Mm.
interesting one to write. I have to see like what's simmering in the back of my mind, but I'm like, I could invest in this.
Fake dating really lends itself to a lot of opportunity
Mm,
for hijinks. Like I think
mm.
that there's
Yes,
so
yes.
like there's so much that could go wrong and there's so much that could go right. And so I think it's a
Yeah.
really fun trope.
It's like it's like forced proximity on steroids
Yes.
because you're
Yes.
just like you're not even just like forced to be near each other, like you're forced to be dating or
Yeah,
married.
act
Like
like
that's like
it's
intense.
happy chaos all around.
So do you have, speaking of all of this and ideas of where you would want to go, do you have any future F1 novels in the works at all?
Yeah, so this is actually really exciting because we just announced a like interconnected standalone situation for Off Track. It's called Overdrive and it'll be coming out late
Amazing.
in 2024. So this year, which is like crazy for me, like doing like
Okay.
back to
Oh
back
my
like that.
gosh.
Like, but yeah, super excited. That one will kind of talk about one of the drivers that we get to meet in Offtrack, like very briefly. But that one will explore Darian's character from Offtrack. And then also just like a whole different spin. Well, not a female driver, we get like a female like programming developer sort of situation. So very
Hmm.
much like different from Offtrack, a little bit more like heavy on the romance side, but so excited for that. And
Okay.
that one is Grumpy Sunshine, and I had so much fun writing it.
I
I love it.
love that.
All right. We're going to get into a little rapid fire questions now.
Ooh.
So, first up, who is your favorite F1 driver and who is your favorite team?
Okay, favorite team Ferrari, favorite driver Carlos. I'll follow him wherever he goes. If he goes to Williams, like I have a Ferrari flag. If he goes to Williams, the Williams flag is going up, which isn't the most appealing of things, but I have to be
Yeah.
loyal.
That's fair. We applaud loyalty. I think that's a huge thing. Loyalty
You
above
know
all
what?
else.
I think if Carlos goes to Williams, it'll be an incredible underdog story. I think if he can bring that team back to its former glory, what better story to tell than that one? Like, he'll be the ultimate GOAT. Like, I'm sorry. I think that that would be an incredible decision for him personally.
Yeah.
Potential to
The
just
story
like
writes
shock
itself.
everyone. Hmm.
Yes. Exactly. All right. And so you just mentioned a book that you read recently, but outside of F1 romance, what is your favorite book and or series?
Ooh, okay. Looking at my shelf right now, like I'm directly making eye contact with her. I'm gonna go Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This is like not really a romance, which is like out of
It
character
doesn't
for
have to be
me. But
romance.
I often read romance, but that one I read freshman year of high school, and for some reason, like I was like tears streaming down my face. It's either like that or like Thousand Splendid Suns. Like those made me cry, like bawl hysterically. So I feel like it invoked such an emotional response that it can't like not be one of my favorite books. So it's depressing, but
What are
it's
they about?
Beartown is it's just like it's literally this is like so depressing. It's about like a hockey town in I, I feel so bad if I get like the country's name wrong, but I believe it's Sweden that it's set in. And it's like this hockey town and just a lot of toxic things are going on. And like something very dramatic and very disturbing happens. Like you can check the content warnings for this one, but it's
Yeah.
very
Mhm.
disturbing. And it's kind of like how the town like rebuilds itself around this and like starts to question like what they're allowing like these boys who are playing hockey to do and get away with and like the culture that they've built.
Mm,
So it's very interesting and
Got it.
I'm hoping to get my hands on the sequel. Fingers crossed because I've wanted it
okay.
for a while.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Okay, good rec, good rec. We're filling everyone's shelves with F1 books and also everyone's other recommendations. So everyone should have I don't want to hear anyone complain that they have nothing to read after all these episodes come out because we've got you covered.
Literally. All right. Final question. Are you familiar with the concept of the amazing race?
Yes, I was just watching The Amazing Race Canada in Canada. There
Okay.
we go.
Perfect. So, out of all of the characters that you've written across your books, if you had to pick one character to be your partner on the amazing race, who would you choose and why?
Ooh, I'm going Darian from Overdrive, who you'll meet, and it'll make more sense. But he's
Okay.
he's very crafty, very resourceful, like knows how to like charm people with words, but also like can be sneaky, can be like mischievous, like this whole bundle of just chaos. And I feel like that is what you need
Yeah.
to win the Amazing Race because nothing is ever
Yeah.
straightforward on that show. So that's where I'm gonna go with this.
I love it. So, safe
Perfect
to assume
answer.
that he's the sunshine in the grumpy sunshine in the second book?
Very much
Yes.
so. Yeah. We love like a
Okay.
black cat
Love that.
situation.
100%.
I love
It's also
it.
one of my favorite tropes of all
Mm,
time. So, that and
It's a good
enemies to
one.
lovers.
mm-hmm. Love that
They
one.
kind of go hand in hand, you know? It's kind of like they hate each other and then they realize that they're actually kind of soft for each other and I love it.
Yeah,
I eat it up.
every time.
I love that. All right, before we wrap it up, we want to hand it over to you to tell the people listening where they can find you, where they can find your work, what you have coming up, anything that you want people to know about you.
Yeah, so just my really quick spiel. So you can go ahead and follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm going to be updating most of my stuff. So that's just Esha Patel author, no spaces, no underscores, nothing funky like that. You can also go ahead and check out my website through my Instagram. It's just ishapatelauthor.com. And through there, I'll have all the links to where you can like pre-order any of my novels. For Overdrive, it's going to be coming out in November in Release date November in the UK. Still to be announced whether the paperback will be, like a couple months or quite far in the future in the US. And then for Offtrack, your paperback will be out in September. So really looking forward to that. And it'll be kind of like a little bit of like an
So
advance
soon.
advanced treat here with the giveaway. So really excited for that. But yeah, just keep an eye out. I'm gonna keep posting stuff on my Instagram. That's where I mostly do all my updating again. And as y'all heard, Grumpy Sunshine. So looking forward to that book two situation. But very, very excited and so happy that I was able to chat on here with you guys. Just full circle, like you
Well,
said.
well, Esha, it has been such a pleasure to chat with you today. And I'm sure this is the first time, but it won't be the last. So thanks again for coming on the pod, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
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 Thanks so much for listening to this episode of TG1F, an F1 podcast with Kate and Nicole.
If you like what you heard, don't miss out on the fun between episodes.
Keep up with the chaos on Instagram at 2 Girls 1 Formula. That's spelled out TWO girls numerical 1 formula.
And check out our website, twogirls1formula.com, to shop cute fan-made F1 merch.
See you next week.
But like we said, in the meantime, we'll see you on the internet.